Make sure y'all stay on point with
The Puncher's Point. What is good, y'all? Welcome back to The Puncher's Point. Mario is back at it again, and I have a fight announcement now. I know I'm a little bit late to the party. Obviously, during that week, there were a lot of fight predictions, a lot of fights that were going on within that week. So I couldn't get to the fight announcements, but I'm going to knock one out the way right now. Keyshawn Davis versus Denys Berinchyk, and that is going to be happening on February 14th in Madison Square Garden. Now, a lot of y'all might be thinking, well, Mario, how do you feel about this fight? You really don't talk much about Keyshawn Davis on this podcast, excuse me. And a lot of y'all might be thinking, "Oh, I'm not a big fan of Keyshawn Davis," or "I just really don't care enough to talk about him." And that's not the case. That's far from the case. I think Keyshawn Davis is a very, very talented fighter. I've been a fan of Keyshawn Davis ever since he came out the Olympics. Now, with that being said, the reason why I never really mentioned Keyshawn Davis on this podcast is because, in my opinion, when I do the fight predictions, when I do the fight announcements, when I do all of this type of stuff, I tend to pick fights that either have a world title on it, is a big fight, or regardless, is just a fight that's going to impact boxing. So Keyshawn Davis, every single time he's been on a fight card, it's always been for no title. It's always been somebody that Top Rank has already had lined up for him to beat anyway. However, this is different. This is different. Keyshawn Davis is getting his first world title fight, and he is going to be getting it against Denys Berinchyk. Now, this fight, the reason why I wanted to cover this fight is because both of these guys are undefeated. So I love a good undefeated. I love it when two fighters who are undefeated decide to clash in that ring and sacrifice, their undefeated records. Denys Berinchyk 19-0 with 9 knockouts. Keyshawn Davis 12-0 with 8 knockouts. Now, with that being said, this fight is going to be taking place in Top Rank, and this fight is going to be for the WBO Lightweight Championship. Now, I'm not going to predict anything right now. Instead, I'm going to talk about whether or not I like this fight. Now, some people they don't like this fight. Other people they do. So here's my opinion on it. Overall, to me, I like this fight for Keyshawn Davis. In my opinion, when Keyshawn Davis is on, he is on. When he turns that switch on, it is hard to turn off. Now, the problem with that too is when he's off, he's really off. A good example of that is when he fought Namir Albright. That was not a good performance by Keyshawn Davis. And overall, he doesn't have many off nights, but when they do, it's not the same Keyshawn Davis. And then that brings the question, which Keyshawn Davis are we going to see? Are we going to see Keyshawn Davis against Albright, or are we going to see the Keyshawn Davis that recently just destroyed Gustavo Kemos? That's the question that I got right there. Which Keyshawn Davis are we going to see? As far as Denys Berinchyk, he had that fight against Emanuel Navarrete. Emanuel Navarrete was going up, testing his luck at lightweight. Unfortunately, he didn't come out with the win. Denys Berinchyk did. It was a split decision win for Berinchyk. So now, with that being said, Berinchyk is the WBO lightweight champion, and this is going to be a very, very interesting fight because, in my opinion, this might be Keyshawn Davis' toughest opponent. And also, in my opinion, this is going to be Berinchyk's toughest opponent. Obviously, a lot of people are going to say Navarrete. Navarrete is a good fighter and everything, but I feel like Keyshawn Davis has the style to beat Berinchyk, and I feel like this is going to be a real test for Keyshawn Davis to see how he does against a real boxer like Berinchyk. So, overall, I like that it's being taken place in Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden is the place where you make big moments happen. Madison Square Garden has had many historic moments in boxing, many historic moments in combat sports, and I'm glad that we're finally going to see another fight happen at Madison Square Garden. I've been waiting for that for a very, very long time because it seems that as of nowadays, every single fight's either happening in Saudi Arabia or it's happening in Las Vegas. And overall, I'm glad that we get to see a fight in Madison Square Garden because, in my opinion, Madison Square Garden, personally for me, is probably my favorite sports venue in the world. I've been there once. I mean, I was overwhelmed with the history that surrounded it, so I really do enjoy Madison Square Garden. For me, I'm glad that this is going to be taking place in Madison Square Garden. Now, overall, going back to how I feel about the fight, Keyshawn Davis. He obviously has an extreme amount of confidence. We've seen him call out Teofimo Lopez. We've seen him call out Gervonta Davis. It seems that Keyshawn Davis wants the best fighters. He wants to fight the best, and I can't knock him for it. I really can't because it's refreshing to see a young guy coming up in the sport of boxing, and he's going, "Hey, I want to fight Gervonta Davis. I want to fight guys like Teofimo Lopez." He's trying to chase after the greats, and unfortunately, not many of them are really paying him no mind. They kind of just shrug him off like he's not a good fighter. Keyshawn Davis is a good fighter, and Top Rank gives him the notoriety that he deserves. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's been times where we've complained about Top Rank, but overall, I do believe that if you are a prospect, it is the best place to go. My only problem with Top Rank has been once you become a prospect, it's hard to make yourself a big star in Top Rank. Obviously, we got Tyson Fury and we got, in a way, we got Teofimo Lopez, but overall, it's really hard to make yourself a star in Top Rank. And the reason why is because Top Rank, if you notice, they really don't do a lot of cross promotion. And that's been a problem for Top Rank. You know, they don't do too many fights with Matchroom Boxing and Zone or Golden Boy or PBC. I rarely even seen them collide with PBC. I mean, the big one I can think of was Wilder Fury. So you really don't see it much. And obviously, there's been other fights where they've collabed. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say they haven't, but you rarely see it. So, me personally, I think that Keyshawn Davis is in a good spot right now to build some notoriety. If he goes in there and he dominates Denys Berinchyk, then all of a sudden we're talking about Keyshawn Davis possibly slowly climbing his way up, maybe as a mandatory. Maybe he climb as of right now. I think he's the number 6 lightweight and Berinchyk's the number 5. He climbs into that top 5. Who knows what type of fights we see? And overall, I mean, the lightweight division, there's a lot of guys that are moving to 140, but you still got some guys in that lightweight division, and I feel like this is a good chance for Keyshawn Davis to kind of start growing his name and being like, look, I know y'all didn't take me seriously, but I'm here and I'm here to stay. So y'all are gonna have to fight me one way or the other. That is a good way to basically build your name. And on top of that, if he goes and he wins his WBO championship, then all of a sudden we're talking about Navarrete being a champion. So if you wanted to become undisputed in that division, you have to go through him. Now, hypothetically, if he doesn't get the guys like Gervonta Davis or those types of guys, the Teofimo Lopez's, if he don't get those types of guys, well then what happens after if he does become a champion? Well, I mean, overall, even if you weren't to get one of those guys, you still got a good lightweight division. You still have a lightweight division that is really bumping, and I mean, it's really, it still is popping. Even though a lot of guys are moving to 140, it's still a good division. You got Vasily Lomachenko, and that is a fight that can very well happen because Lomachenko is a part of Top Rank. So I feel like Bob Arum wouldn't have a problem making that fight unless he wants to keep Lomachenko as that golden boy, and unless he wants to keep Keyshawn Davis heat rising. If that's the case, then that fight won't happen. But I have a feeling that Bob Arum is going to do what's right, and he's going to make Lomachenko versus Keyshawn Davis, just like he did with Teofimo Lopez. And when Teofimo Lopez fought Lomachenko and he beat him, Teofimo Lopez automatically became a big name in boxing. And then Lomachenko had to work his way back up, but he worked his way back up, and Lomachenko was still a big name. So there's that. You got Shakur Stevenson. Now it's going to be very, very interesting to see if Keyshawn Davis will ever fight Shakur Stevenson, considering the fact that Shakur had, his differences with Top Rank, and then he ended up moving to Matchroom Boxing. So it's going to be interesting to see if they strike a deal right there. Plus, not only that, but Keyshawn Davis and Shakur Stevenson, last time I checked, were pretty good, pretty close friends. But who knows? Maybe if the money's right, and the fight makes sense, we might see that fight. And obviously, it all depends on what happens between Shakur and Floyd Schofield. Um, but yeah, I mean, overall, if Keyshawn can't get Gervonta Davis, there's still some good fights that can be made. He could bounce up to 140 and fight one of those champions. If he really does want to go after Teofimo Lopez, that's a fight that I think Bob Arum could make if Keyshawn Davis keeps this heat wave going. Now, what happens if Berinchyk wins? Well, if Berinchyk wins, what does that mean for him? Well, if I have a feeling that means that you're gonna have to start putting Berinchyk against some of those Lions, and I feel like and honestly, the one that would make sense. And this is a very interesting matchup. I hope that they make it happen. And both these guys, I feel like, are very humble, respectful fighters, and I think it would happen. Berinchyk versus Lomachenko, and do it in Ukraine. I feel like that would be a big, big fight right there. And you got two Ukrainian fighters that are gonna go collide in that ring, and you're going to see basically who comes out on top. Now, obviously, the one thing that I'm not mentioning, and it's for a reason because I'm going to explain, is Lomachenko decided that he's not going to be fighting for the remainder of 2024. However, 2024 is over. It's almost over, I should say, which means we are going into 2025, which means who knows when Lomachenko will be back. And obviously, when he comes back, there's obviously talks between him and Gervonta Davis that have always been speculating and circling. It seems like it's been years now since those talks have kind of creeped in and slid under the radar. But I feel like Lomachenko versus Berinchyk is a fight that can definitely happen. I don't know if Bob Arum is going to test his luck. I highly doubt he's going to test his luck and have Gervonta Davis fight somebody like Denys Berinchyk, even though I feel like if Gervonta Davis were to fight Berinchyk, it's probably more notable than a lot of his wins that he's had. I mean, the only guys I can really think of that people didn't say were underweight or drained or they were coming up from a division was I mean, Pitbull Cruz was a good win. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of right now process some wins that he's had where there hasn't been an excuse tied to it. But I would say Pitbull was a good win for him. And that was a hard win, but Gervonta Davis came out on top with that. So I don't think Berinchyk and Gervonta Davis is ever going to happen. I don't think that Top Rank is going to feed Berinchyk to the wolf of 135 pounds, which is Gervonta Davis. I don't think he's going to test him against Shakur Stevenson, even though that would be a pretty interesting matchup. So, in my opinion, Bob Arum has a history of staying in Top Rank if he can. Lomachenko versus Berinchyk in Ukraine. I think that would be a very good fight, and I think it would sell, especially in Ukraine. So, I would really like to see that fight happen. But overall, the reason why this fight is so important to announce is because both of these guys, they have something to prove. Keyshawn Davis keeps on getting looked down. Everybody keeps looking at him as a prospect, which don't get me wrong. I mean, I believe he still is, but now you're going to that level where you're going to go from a prospect to a champion, or you have the chance and the opportunity to do that. So, in my opinion, this is important that Keyshawn Davis not only wins, but he has a dominant performance over somebody like Denys Berinchyk. Because if he does, then all of a sudden we're talking about Keyshawn Davis in a different light. Obviously, he had a very good win against Gustavo Kemos. Don't get me wrong. Credit to him. He's had some good names on that list. I mean, Anthony Yiggett was a good one. Um, he had Pedraza on there. So he's had some decent names on his resume. Don't get me wrong. It's nobody huge. It's no top stars or anything like that, but he's had some former champions. He's had, some former contenders. He's had guys who were on the come up that he beat. But this is the win that's going to make Keyshawn Davis. And then as far as Denys Berinchyk, well, you beat Emanuel Navarrete, but you barely beat him. And on top of that, now we find out that Navarrete had an injury. So now all of a sudden you start adding those little asterisks next to that win. So what happens with Berinchyk? Well, Berinchyk has to fight a real fighter. You know what I'm saying? And even though Keyshawn Davis isn't one of those top names, I feel like that's a good test for Denys Berinchyk. Can you go in there and can you outclass and outbox Keyshawn Davis and keep that title? Because that's a true lightweight. That's not somebody that's coming up. That's a true lightweight. That's a true 135 pounder. And then after that, who knows where Denys Berinchyk goes? Maybe he goes up to 140 and makes a fight with somebody like Alberto Puello or Jose Valenzuela, Richardson Hitchens. Who knows? But in my opinion, as of right now, Berinchyk needs a win. He needs a big win to kind of solidify himself as a true champion at lightweight. Because as of right now, he is a champion. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of people aren't really looking at Berinchyk. A lot of people are kind of underlooking Berinchyk. And as far as Keyshawn Davis, I mean, the hype is there. I mean, the guy has everything it takes to be a star in boxing. I mean, he can talk, he can fight. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the guy is just filled with charisma. So he's easy to market off. He's easy to be like, this is our poster fighter, and this is who we're gonna put and we're gonna center around Top Rank with in the future. Obviously not now, but in the future, he is a guy that you could obviously look at as the poster child for Top Rank boxing. But the problem is, if Keyshawn Davis doesn't start fighting real fighters soon or real champions soon, nobody's gonna look at him that way. And I'm not talking about us as the fans. I'm talking about the guys like Teofimo Lopez. I'm talking about the guys like Gervonta Davis. If y'all forgot, when Teofimo Lopez and Keyshawn Davis were going back and forth after Teofimo's win in the ring, Teofimo looked right at him and started grabbing all the belts. He's like, "Do you got this? Do you have this one? Do you have this belt? No, you don't." So he was basically telling him, until you start winning belts and until you start accomplishing things, I'm not going to fight you. And as of right now, it's going to be even harder to get that fight with Teofimo Lopez because he's only named three guys that he wants to fight: Jerron Boots Ennis, Gervonta Davis, and I believe the other one was Terrence Crawford. Those are the three guys that he wants to fight. He said it already. So this is the start to Keyshawn Davis building his legacy, building his accomplishments, and building himself up as a big name to go fight somebody like Teofimo Lopez. And it could be done. They're both in the same promotion. They're both in Top Rank, so it can be done. But it's going to be very, very hard for him to climb that hill. As far as Gervonta Davis, I mean, with the fights that we've gotten from Gervonta Davis, us as fans, we haven't been real happy about him. I mean, a lot of people haven't been happy about these fights. The Frank Martin fight, it was a good fight, but then obviously a lot of people were saying Frank Martin was drained. The last good fight we really had, or the fight that we really wanted from Tank Davis, was Ryan Garcia. And that fight in itself, I mean, it was good. Then they made the excuses about all that. So it's going to be hard to get that fight with Gervonta Davis. But I do believe that if Keyshawn Davis can win this fight, I do believe that you can make the fight happen with Vasily Lomachenko, and you could possibly make it happen with Shakur Stevenson. I believe those are the two fights that you can make with Keyshawn Davis if Shakur Stevenson wants to make that fight. Like I said, last time I checked, both of those guys were pretty close to each other. And as far as Berinchyk, if he wins this fight, I do believe that Lomachenko versus Berinchyk is the fight to make, and you have to do it in Ukraine. That's the way it's going to sell, and I wouldn't mind it being in that part of the world. So that's personally my opinions on Keyshawn Davis versus Denys Berinchyk. As far as who I gotta win, y'all gonna have to wait to the prediction episode to find that out. And overall, I don't know who's gonna win yet. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more research. I'm gonna have to put my notes together and collect them, and then analyze who I feel like would win and how they're gonna do it. But that's why you should be predicting. That's why you should be tuning into the prediction episodes, because again, usually we give some good advice. Usually we give some good betting advice. And now since it's just me, now a lot of it's all riding on me to give you that good advice. So make sure y'all tune into the Puncher's Point to get some of that betting advice. But with that being said, this fight is going to be taking place on February 14th, Madison Square Garden, for the WBO Lightweight Championship. Keyshawn Davis versus Denys Berinchyk. Two undefeated fighters, 19-0, 9 knockouts for Berinchyk, 12-0, 8 knockouts for Keyshawn Davis. So who will come out on top? Well, y'all are going to have to tune into the prediction episode. But until then, don't just wait to tune into the prediction episode. Go look at some of our other prediction episodes and go look at some of our other post-fight breakdowns and see how accurate we really were. Recently, see how accurate I was, and then base your betting decisions on that. But with that being said, make sure y'all tune into the social medias. Make sure y'all tune into the content that we be dropping on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Discord, Reddit, you name it, Threads, we got it. So make sure y'all definitely tune into those social medias. Make sure y'all tap into the podcast and make sure y'all listen. Look, if y'all are at work and you can't open up the YouTube video, make sure y'all tune into the podcast. And again, be sure to comment on all the videos, all the podcasts. Make sure y'all comment. Make sure y'all leave your reactions down below. Make sure y'all, again, I would love to hear your thoughts on this fight as well. Y'all might have a different opinion than me on this fight. Please type them down in the comments below. But with that being said, the most important thing you should do is stay on point with the Puncher's Point. What's up, y'all? If y'all love this episode, make sure y'all subscribe. You hit that notifications button, and also take a look at the recent episodes that we made before this. Make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.